Good morning, everyone. This is Richard Lepowski from myNet, and today it's my great pleasure to, together with my colleague Michal Rosig, our Chief Product Officer, to unveil myNet 4.5, the latest version of myNet that is focused on tackling rework in messy processes. As always, the presentation is divided into two parts. First of all, it's more of the business news, business background of the newest release in terms of what problems we're solving and what value it brings to the customer, also from a higher level. And then the second part is really demonstrating those features in action and showing you how those things can be achieved. So let's get right on it. First of all, I have the pleasure to announce that we have opened another office, our fourth, in Bucharest, Romania, which allows us to basically cover the Central and Eastern European area, as well as Turkey and countries surrounding that. So if you are in that region, now we have someone who can in person, face-to-face interact with you. Then we also have great news in terms of growing the team. Since the start of 2019, we've grown to 55 people, basically doubling in size, and we see this growth continuing since the demand is great from both the partner and customer side. In terms of some good reading or some resources that you could check out that were quite successful with our online readers, we have the newest telco guide in terms of benefiting from process mining, which I encourage you to check out, as well as our live webinar from the RPA Live 2019, where our CEO Rasto Hlabac has been presenting our newest take on process mining with the hierarchical process mining functionality, which allows you to connect both the high-level data from systems like SAP together with the recordings from interfaces, so that you can dive deep into what is actually happening in those processes, not only from a system level. With regards to what we are preparing, especially for those who are now deciding whom they should go with in terms of a process mining solution, we are preparing a guide that should help you to put more transparency into what you actually need and how you should go about it and decide which vendor is for you. Then we're also preparing a process mining and RPA guide 2.0, since the first one was so far one of the most successful pieces that we have brought out. So there's quite a lot you can check out on our website. And now looking at our roadmap, as you may know, in a few months ago, we have basically released our dashboards, which we were aiming at whoever is inside of the corporation and would like to benefit from process mining, whether that's a CEO or whether that's a director or a team member that just wants to see what their team's impact is on the entire organization, on their division or department. Currently, today, our newest version 4.5 is really focused on pinpointing rework and its root cause, and hinting on our next release, which will be one of the bigger one here in September. We will be looking at what would happen if you would change the process and how this would develop. And I will just leave you with that hint, and we will very soon see what we are bringing out. Without further ado, let's jump into myNet 4.5. We have four main functionalities that we have brought out, and I will shortly list them and then go through each one to identify what it is about. First of all, we have the collapsible clusters. Then we have improvements within the import wizard when importing the data. We have added also the Russian language for our customers and partners from Russian-speaking countries. And then we also have created the Rework Detector, which is the most exciting feature among these, and we hope that there will be a lot of uptake and feedback from our customers and partners, since since in preparation of this functionality, we have already seen really positive comments. So let's dive right in. First of all, let's start with the collapsible clusters. As you know, within large complex processes such as the spaghetti one that you can see on the left, it's quite difficult to oftentimes make sense of the process. Therefore, some time ago we have brought out the clustering functionality, which allowed you to basically have activities that had the same attribute for all the cases to be grouped into these rectangles, so that you can see which are either departments, or if you had, for example, a clustering attribute like the software application in which this activity has happened, it had been clustered. Right now, what we're adding to that functionality is basically the ability to collapse them into smaller activities and basically hide that complexity from the process in order to make it easier for you to check out the entire process and analyze it. The great thing about clusters and their collapsibility is basically that all the metrics, all the statistics are aggregated. So now, for example, you could cluster your teams and look at their performance from a much more higher level than looking at a spaghetti process like the one you see on your left. So this have been collapsible clusters. Let's go on to the import wizard improvements. As you know, you have been able to basically upload any kind of data, and myNet was trying to detect what kind of format the data was in, and did give you some leeway in terms of editing the data. However, we saw that since there were many different patterns and cultural differences and nuances also in terms of dates or timestamps, and also there were quite a few requests for filling out, let's say, null values, we have added the possibility for you to freely decide what the date and time format should be, and basically now you have full control over the format. And you can, as you can see, you can also see a preview of that given format that you have chosen. So this is the import wizard and its improvement. The Russian language probably doesn't have to be explained in detail. And now let me come to the most exciting feature of the release of 4.5, which is the Rework Detector. First of all, let's jump into what is rework. Basically, we could say that it's an activity that has been repeated again in the process within the same process run, within the same case, because of either unexpected changes or because of negligence, which is the more important of those two, because there can be rework that is acceptable or that is unpredictable and you cannot do much about it. The bigger problem is with the one that is happening due to negligence. But let me go further. Rework is present in any industry, in all kinds of companies, whether you look at purchase orders, design specifications, customer tickets and customer support, whether you look at bank loans or insurance claims. Whatever you're doing, even in, for example, software development like we do, we see a lot of rework and it's costing you many resources. So for example, in manufacturing, specifically in automotive, we have an example where a vehicle has been assembled, or during the assembly of the vehicle, doors had to be attached to it and it had to be connected with cables. So in our process here, the parts have been sourced, the vehicle doors have been assembled, then it went into quality control, but the problem was that they detected that there was a poor fit for some reason with the cables within the door and they couldn't be closed properly. So therefore, the vehicle had to be moved into the containment zone where basically an inspection followed, and the analysis revealed that wrong labeling was the cause of adding wrong or the incorrect parts to that particular door. And then what needed to follow is to basically figure out where else this might possibly have happened. And of course, the next step was disassembling those doors and removing the incorrect parts. And then back again, it went into the correct part sourcing, vehicle door assembly, and into further assembly of the entire car itself. So basically, this gives you already an idea how it flows down and then goes back. And even all of these activities would be unnecessary in case there wouldn't be this error that happened. So this is a short example from manufacturing. In terms of banking, we have another example where a loan has been applied for, it has been approved, but the problem was that the bank tried to contact that particular client. And the client wasn't responsive. For some reason, the bank didn't succeed in terms of following up, and the loan or the mortgage approval has expired. Then, of course, the client called back after some weeks of not knowing what is going on, and there was the source of the problem that actually the bank teller has provided the wrong address of the client. So this was the cause of the rework, and the whole loan application had to be submitted again, which caused again delays and a repetition of this activity. And in the end, many of these clients, because this has been happening multiple times in that particular process, ended up of not actually taking the offer from the bank and went to another one instead. So that was a short banking example, and the impact is more important. What we found is that rework usually can cost you 5 to 25% either of that contract value or of the cost of that particular case or let's say product run that you have. And that is mostly because of the direct costs that are much easier to estimate and to evaluate, because you know how many people are working in the process, how long it takes them, what kind of equipment, materials, and other things are part of the process, and that you basically need to pay for. But then you also have things like lower quality, which can impact customer satisfaction. You have discounts that you need to get because in case you don't manage to deliver on time. But the probably more important and kind of tough to pinpoint are the indirect costs, which basically lead to a productivity decrease. You lose the schedule. So instead of working on let's say another loan or working on some other project, you are basically working on this one, and everything else gets delayed and pushed back in terms of schedule, which can lead to claims from the customer side and even litigation, and of course can hurt your customer satisfaction and can make people leave your brand. So this is an overall impact of what rework can actually do to your company. In terms of direct process mining rework analysis and what it can cost you, it's important to have two things in mind. We, from the process mining perspective and also in general, understand that there are two main types of rework. First is the self loop, which is basically an activity, if you already have worked with a process mining tool, that is repeated after it has been just done. That means you see this arrow here saying that it has been repeated 2 times. And this kind of rework isn't that, I would say, horrible. It does cause you some extra work and some cost, of course, but the impact is not that big because you are not forwarding it further into the process, and it can be usually spotted faster and more easy, since process mining, for example, allows you to see it directly here. The more important one and the, I would say, more costly type of rework is the loops or which we call loops, which is basically an activity that is repeating itself, but not directly, but after it has went through a part of the process, whether that's one other activity or multiple activities, and then is again repeated. Why it's a problem is that you are again committing more resources to it, but then on the other hand, it's also causing delays, and I will show you what this cause could be. And more in terms of process mining detection, this is very difficult to do, especially if you have huge complex processes and loops that are not as straightforward as this one. So if you have a huge process, and Michal will show you one, you'll see why that tends to be quite difficult to detect. Alright, so this would be the types of rework, cell loops and loops. And let's look at one of the use cases that we have done for a telco company, which was one of the largest in the world. And we looked at their procure-to-pay process only for a smaller part of their business. And we identified that within some 11,000 cases that they had altogether, in 52% they had these cell loops, so activities repeating themselves after each other, and in about 10% they had loops that went basically further, so activities that have been repeated, but after some time, after other activities have been completed as well. The most important part is that we analyzed how many resources were used in that particular process or worked in that particular process, what the throughput time was with the rework and without the rework, which already gives you an idea, okay, if there is a rework, we can expect that there will be longer time. And we identified what the bandwidth of the resources is, which means how many of those resources are actually tied up in the rework. And based on an estimated potential for reduction of that rework, we basically came up to 4%, which gave us 836,000 euros in total for that particular year. And similarly, we have gone through the same analysis for the loops and found out it was 1.1 million. So altogether, we have about 2 million euros per year out of that entire process that could be saved by limiting or minimizing rework in these cases. So now you may be asking, all right, so what do we do with rework? How do we tackle it? So first of all, you need to know where it is. You need to evaluate its impact, choose the right candidates, because some rework is acceptable, some may be unacceptable because let's say the resources tied up are much more expensive, or there is material connected with it, or some other activities, and therefore you need to be able to analyze what the root cause is. Once you do that, we usually recommend to take the improvement action and of course monitor the results in the dashboards or through the analyst version. Until today, you were able to basically look at and spot cell loops that I already showed you within process mining tools, and if you wanted to identify where loops, like the bigger ones are, you had to use sequence filters and basically decide, all right, so if I have this activity, does it repeat itself somewhere else? And then some providers like us and others had maximum repetition counts, which told you something about how many times a particular activity has been repeated the most time, let's say. So the maximum repetition count. The problem was that it was, or it is with regular tools, it is difficult to identify the rework loops, especially in complex processes such as we call them, spaghetti processes, or such as procure-to-pay, order-to-cash, or even manufacturing. And not only that, but the bigger problem was that yes, you could identify where those individual loops have been created, but what was more difficult is out of all the, let's say, paths and previous activities, it was a challenge to find out what the trigger activities were. So basically, what started that particular rework, because that is leading you to the root cause of how the rework has been started. And for that, we have been looking for a solution that would make this much easier, much more intuitive, and much faster as well. And then finally, we wanted to have a way how you can analyze the impact of rework on your entire organization so that you can get to similar numbers that we got to above in a much easier way rather than spending your time with a lot of different filtering and kind of tweaking here and there in order to get to the right answer. And that is where Minit 4.5 is coming in with the Rework Detector. Basically, we created full-fledged functionality to uncover all kinds of rework. Also, we enable you to find out what the triggers were and what basically the victims were, what were the activities that have been affected by that particular rework in order to find first the root cause and second really the impact of that. And as I said, this new feature is basically making identifying rework much faster, much less effort is required. It helps you to uncover loops that would be hidden otherwise. It helps you also to identify the root cause and also to analyze the impact in the end. So I guess this gives you a good idea of where myNet 4.5 comes in, but in order to really make it visual for you, I would like to now invite Michal to make the demo and show you what we can do in reality in the product. Michal, the stage is yours.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. We are very happy that you joined. We are very excited about the new release of Minit. And today I would like to walk you through the main features of Minit version 4.5. And let's start with the most important one, and that's rework metrics. Uh, it's important because rework is, without any doubt, one of the most influential causes of process inefficiencies. And identifying rework, loops, repetitive tasks is just one of the first tasks that most of the analysts and consultants do when analyzing a process. And it's nothing new for a Minit. If we look at the current functionality, we already were able to work with reworks and to find them. You could use filters to filter self loops, so activities that are repeated with the same activity immediately using a sequence filter with the specific settings. And you could also find repetitions based on a metric called maximum occurrence in case. So if an activity occurred more than once in a case, or you could define a certain limits, you could find these particular cases. And of course, you could then use these filters. You could use an inversion of those filters and then use the functionality like process compare or the statistics to find the particular information about the duration of the cases and individual activities, about the resources working on those activities, and so on. But we always felt that this is not easy enough, that rework should be spotted right away and should be spotted visually. And we were really trying hard to find a way how to do that. So let's look at how rework metrics change this. We intentionally, for this demonstration, we intentionally chose not a very simple demo process. We chose unstructured order to cache example, a spaghetti-like process because in these kind of processes, which are usual real-life processes, it's even more difficult to spot reworks and loops. So first of all, let me walk you through the individual metrics. They are available where the frequential and performance analysis is. So there's a new button for rework. You can easily switch between those particular areas. And we offer several types of rework metrics. The first of it is a self-loop count, which is probably self-explanatory. It's an activity followed immediately by the same type of activity. On the other hand, loop count tells you how many times a loop is present in the case, or how many times an activity and edge is a part of a loop. And loop is when the activity is followed by the same activity, but not immediately, but after executing several other activities, 1, 2, 3, or more. Rework count combines these two metrics. So it is basically a self-loop count plus loop count. There are two special ones, and that's loop inflow and loop outflow. Loop inflow is the number of loops that is going in to an activity. So it's entering an activity. Number of different loops entering an activity. On the other hand, an outflow is number of loops going out of the activity. Net loops gain is a difference between the loops going in and going out. So it's basically identifying those activities that are responsible for the loops. These activities are highlighted, and we call them starters or initiators of the loops and finishers or consumers of the loops. So activities that are basically starting the loop and are causing the rework, and the activities that are ending the rework in the process. You can change those metrics without any problem just by clicking. You can even switch from the numbers, precise numbers, to percentage, so that you can easily spot how many times compared to the number of cases there is a loop or a self loop. And there is also a possibility to select a particular metric for the activities and a different metric for the edges, or you can connect those two and just with a single click change both. The rework metrics are also available in all other parts of Minit. So of course, if you go to statistics and you look at the individual activities and at the summary statistics, you can immediately spot how well organized your process is, how many self loops, what is the percentage of loops in your process, and what is basically the average rework in your cases. If you want to know and have an overview of these metrics for the individual activities, you just scroll to the right and all the metrics are available in the table. And you can, for example, sort by net loop gain and identify the activities that are causing or consuming those loops. Also, the filters incorporate rework metrics. So if we take an example of attribute conditional filter, we can select an activity and we can just change from attribute to metric and say we would like to know which cases have this particular activity with a certain loop count or a certain range of loop counts. And then, of course, use the process comparison to work with those filtered cases further. So let's look at the individual metrics. So if we go back here and switch to self loop count, as we said, in this kind of unstructured process, it is very hard to identify those loops. The self loops are probably not so difficult. Of course, you can see a big thick arrow here, but sometimes if there are more arrows, more exceptional paths, it is kind of hard to spot it. So the halo effect and the thickness of the line is just highlighting those activities with the most self loops. The same goes with the loop count, so you can easily spot which edges are repeated in loops, which activities are part of a loop. And um, and of course, you can also use statistics like or metrics like loop inflow and loop outflow to even highlight the whole loops. So if we switch to loop outflow and we look at the process from like more distance like this, we see a lot of different exceptional paths here, and we are also in this version introducing a new slider here on the legend for the edges, where you can just drag this and focus only on the most important edges that are part of the loops. And as you can see, you can clearly identify not only the activities that are part of the loop, but also the edges and basically the whole loop in that particular process. And go back if you wish. The net loop gain is the metric that identifies the individual activities that are causing, initiating the loops, or consuming and finishing the loops. So if we switch to net loop gain, we see that in colors. And as you can see, even though those two are connected, the net loop gain is, of course, valid only for activities. So it automatically switches rework count for the edges. And but the colors are just identifying that activities with red color, these are the initiators, so that's the positive number. So there are more loops started than finished, and the blue ones with the negative numbers are the ones that finish the loops. We can also switch to percentage and just see it right away here in the process map, and again in statistics and so on. If you want to know more details about a certain activity, you can just click on that activity, and we also introduce the whole rework section with all the information about that particular activity. And of course, if we are talking about continuous process improvement and the so-called life after the analysis, we would like to show this to the business users, to the process owners, process stakeholders, to be able to monitor the reworks and the loops in your processes. So we are very happy that we can also introduce the reworks in Minit dashboards. And it's built in right into the process map widget. So in your favorite dashboards, you can just update to the new version of the process map widget. And the rework switch is available with all the metrics and all the colors, and you can easily spot if there are any inefficiencies, even in almost real time. So that was briefly about reworks. We know it might be a bit more difficult to maybe understand the individual dependencies of the metrics. If you want to know more, if you want to get more insight, if this is something that is of interest for you, please just contact us. We give you a more detailed walkthrough. And I would like to spend a few more minutes on the other features very briefly that we are introducing. First of all, Minit speaks Russian. We entered and introduced a new localization, very easy to switch to Russian language in the options. Just switch and you can use it in Russian. We, of course, support English, Portuguese, Slovak, and Spanish as previously. Um, when we look at our demo project, um, and those of you who already worked with Minit know that we automatically, for organization of the process map, we automatically identify what we call clustered attributes. So if there are any attributes that allow for the process map or social chart to be to cluster the activities, this is available. We automatically detect these attributes and we offer you the possibility to switch them on or off and have a more organized process map. What we are introducing in Minit version 4.5 is the possibility to expand and collapse the individual clusters and to enhance the functionality with map simplification. And of course, the numbers that you see here, either in frequential analysis or in the performance analysis, uh, everything is calculated and aggregated on the clusters. So you will not lose any information. All the activities that are inside of that cluster are just recalculated, and the cluster shows you the statistics and the metrics for the whole area and whole set of activities, or in the social chart resources. And finally, we are introducing also improvements to our import wizard. There are several. One of them is in connecting to a database source. So if we connect to a database, test the connection, um, or list the tables, select the orders here, go to next step. As you can see, we are now introducing default null replacement values. So in case your data set has empty cells, there are some null values in there, either because your systems are not logging properly all the information, or there's any problem, or you want to fill in those empty spaces with any default values. You can choose that for all nullable columns in your database, and we are supporting all the different data types that are available in the database. If we look at the other sources, for example, we take this example of dataset and try to import it. In the import wizard, where you are selecting the individual types of attributes, we offer the possibility to set data types. Because as we know, sometimes numbers can be used as numbers, but sometimes numbers should be used as, let's say, product codes. So the software should work with that as with categorical items, or you have this kind of columns where you have very different values, sometimes with a currency code, sometimes as an integer, sometimes as a float, sometimes you have an empty value. So right now, clicking on the name of the column will just give you a more advanced possibility where we detect automatically the possible data types, but you can also choose from the ones that are not detected. And we can see this could be a float here, this could be a real number, and you can immediately see the conversion to a recognized data. You can choose a culture if that's something that your data are in a special culture, or you can just manually choose and format those data into whatever you want. So we get rid of the currency symbol, we switch to comma as a decimal separator. We see here there are some thousands with a space, so we choose a space, and we want to fill in the default value. So we put 100 as a default value. And of course, you can rename the column also in the screen. And as you can see, the values are correctly recognized, and you can apply that pattern to your column. This is also available for date, for duration, for floats, integers, and strings. So that was a brief introduction into the newest features in Minit 4.5. As I said, if you want to know more, if you want to get a deeper insight into that, please contact us. I'm very happy that you joined this presentation, And I'm giving the word back to Richard. Thank you.
Michal, thank you very much for the very interesting demonstration of what myNet 4.5 looks like in action. With this, I would like to summarize the functionality that you can look forward to. It's basically the collapsible clusters, which help you to analyze large complex processes and make it much easier to look at individual clusters. Then we have import wizard improvements that allow you to manipulate data more freely within myNet. We are adding the Russian language for our Russian customers and partners. And most importantly, we are adding the Rework Detector, which allows you not only to identify rework in detail, whether that's loops or self loops, but also allows you to look into the root cause very quickly and also seeing what the impact of that rework is on the following activities. So with this, I would like to invite everybody to reach out to us if you want to have a detailed walkthrough, if you want to know more, if you have any feedback or comments, just contact us at sales@mynet.io or go to our web at mynet.io/trial to download the latest version and see what it looks like. With this, I would like to thank everybody for the feedback and have a great day.